Please, don't lift my dress. The CEO is dying on a stockroom floor. Her voice cracks, desperate, begging the one man she spent months humiliating. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, the smell of cardboard and antiseptic. Her skin is going gray. The single father kneels beside her, pharmacy vest still on, hands hovering over her abdomen. She clutches the fabric tighter. Please, not you. Not the man she called incompetent in front of a dozen witnesses 3 days ago. Not the night shift worker she told was a waste of a paycheck, not him. But he can see the mottled skin, the clock ticking down in minutes, maybe less. His 12-year-old daughter's voice echoes in his head. Why do you let her talk to you like that? He lifts the dress anyway, and freezes. Not because of the catastrophic bleed he expected, because of the scar. Faded. Precise. Running vertically along her abdomen. A scar he recognizes. Because 6 years ago, his hands made it. The night his wife died. The night he saved 32 strangers. The night he operated on a woman tagged Jane Doe, destroying him. And she has no idea. His hands don't shake. They move on instinct. Pressure points. Positioning. Barked orders to terrified employees. The paramedic who arrives takes one look and asks, "Who the hell are you?" The single father doesn't answer. But the question hangs in the air like smoke. If you believe that the people we dismiss often carry the deepest truths, stay with this story. Because what happens when this woman learns who saved her life will restore your faith in justice. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who you really were? But to understand how it came to this, how a decorated surgeon ended up stocking shelves while the woman he saved tore him apart, we need to go back 6 years, to the night everything broke. 6 years had passed since the night Marcus Webb stopped being a doctor. The alarm clock buzzed at 6:15 a.m. He silenced it before the second beep. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen morning light filtered through thin curtains. He could hear the radiator ticking. Marcus stood. His knees popped. 43 felt older than it should. Down the hall he knocked twice on Lily's door. "I'm up," she called. He didn't believe her. He knocked again. "Dad, I'm up." This time he heard movement. He headed to the kitchen. The coffee maker gurgled. He pulled bread from the freezer, dropped 2 slices in the toaster. His hands moved through the routine without thought. Butter. Jam. Her lunchbox on the counter, the same faded blue one, 12 years old. Dark, curly hair she hadn't brushed yet. Her mother's eyes. "Morning," she said. "Morning." She sat at the small table. He set toast in front of her. She ate slowly, still waking up. He poured orange juice. She drank it in 3 long gulps. "Math test today," she said. "You ready?" "I think so." He nodded. She'd studied last night while he slept. She was good at math. Better than he'd been at her age. She finished her toast, grabbed her backpack, checked her phone. Marcus picked up the lunchbox to hand it to her. Her handwriting, careful and looping. "You're still a hero, Dad." He stared at it longer than he meant to. She was watching him from the doorway. "Lily, see you after school," she said quickly. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her. Marcus stood in the kitchen holding the note. The coffee maker hissed. Outside, a bus rolled past. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who restocked shelves at night. By 8 o'clock, Lily was at school and Marcus was trying to sleep. The apartment was too bright. He pulled the curtains. Sleep came, but it didn't stay. By 2 in the afternoon, he was awake again, staring at the ceiling, thinking about things he'd spent 6 years trying not to think about. At 10 p.m., he pulled on his blue vest and walked 3 blocks to Hargrove Pharmacy. The store sat on a corner lot, lit up like a beacon. 24 hours. Always open. Marcus pushed through the double doors. The air inside smelled like floor cleaner and cardboard. Jenny was behind the counter. 40-something, kind face, always early for her shift. "Hey, Marcus." Grabbed his cart from the back. Began the routine. Restock aisle 3. Check expiration dates on aisle 7. Clean the spill, someone reported near the refrigerated section. Jenny found him 20 minutes later. "Owner's coming tonight," she said. Her voice was low. "Surprise inspection." Marcus didn't look up. He was straightening boxes of bandages on a shelf. "You hear me?" Jenny asked. "I heard. Just heads up." She walked away. Marcus kept working. He'd learned a long time ago how to make himself invisible. Don't give anyone a reason to notice you. It was easier that way. At 3 p.m., the side door opened. Lily walked in. She did this twice a week, came straight from school to wait in the break room while he finished his shift. Homework spread across the table. Earbuds in, she waved at him through the window. He waved back. She settled into the plastic chair, pulled out her math folder. Marcus returned to the first aid aisle. A customer had asked him yesterday where the bandages were. She'd walked right past them. They were on the bottom shelf, exactly where the planogram said they should. But people didn't look down. So Marcus moved them, eye level, where people could see them. It made sense. He was sliding the last box into place when he heard the engine outside. A car door slammed, heels on pavement. Marcus glanced toward the front windows. A black sedan sat in the parking lot, polished, expensive. The headlights cut through the fluorescent glow of the store. In the break room, Lily looked up from her homework. Marcus turned back to the shelf. The double doors swung open. Victoria Hargrove had arrived. Victoria Hargrove walked through the pharmacy door, tailored charcoal suit, sharp heels that clicked against the linoleum. Clipboard in one hand, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Her steel gray hair was pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. She was 52 and looked like someone who'd spent 20 years proving something to everyone around her. Jenny straightened behind the counter. The delivery driver near aisle 4 went quiet mid-conversation with a customer. Even the overhead music seemed to lower in volume. Victoria didn't greet anyone. She scanned the front displays with the expression of someone inspecting a crime scene. "When do these promotional materials expire?" she asked. The night manager, a thin man named Phil, hurried over. "End of the month, ma'am. It's the 28th. "Yes, but we still have. Remove them. Tonight." Phil nodded. Victoria moved past him without waiting for confirmation. She walked aisle by aisle, made notes on her clipboard, stopped at the pharmacy counter and asked Jenny why the inventory log hadn't been updated since Tuesday. Jenny explained that the system had been down. Victoria wrote something down and kept walking. Marcus stayed in aisle 3. He could hear her heels getting closer. She rounded the corner. Stopped. Looked at the first aid section, then at Marcus, then back at the shelves. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Marcus straightened. Kept his eyes on the shelf. "Restocking," he said quietly. "Why is the layout different?" He hesitated. Set down the box he was holding. "Customers couldn't find the bandages," he said. "They were on the bottom shelf." The planogram sheet in her hand. The shelf again. "This isn't what the planogram specifies." "No, ma'am." "Then why did you change it?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He kept his voice even. "People were asking where they were, walking right past them. Eye level makes more sense." Victoria's expression didn't change. She flipped a page on her clipboard. "Eye level makes more sense," she repeated. Her tone made it sound ridiculous. "And you decided this on your own? I thought it would help. You're not paid to think." The words landed like a slap. A customer 2 aisles over. Phil appeared at the end of the aisle, frozen. Jenny stood behind the counter, her hands gripping the edge. In the break room, visible through the glass window, Lily looked up from her homework. Victoria stepped closer to Marcus. She was shorter than him, but somehow she took up more space. "You're a night shift stalker," she said. Her voice was calm, clinical. "Your job is to follow instructions, not to redesign store layouts based on your personal opinions." Marcus said nothing. This kind of incompetence is exactly why turnover is so high in these positions. She didn't need to. You don't understand systems, you don't respect processes, you just do whatever occurs to you in the moment. She gestured at the shelf like it was evidence in a trial. "How long have you worked here, Marcus?" 2 years. 2 years. And in 2 years you've never once thought to ask before making changes. He kept his eyes down. "I was trying to be helpful." "Helpful? Helpful?" Victoria wrote something on her clipboard. "Let me be clear. You are not helpful. You are a waste of a paycheck. The only reason you're still employed is because we're chronically understaffed and I don't have time to train someone new." The customer in aisle 5 left, didn't even finish shopping, just walked out. Phil stared at the floor. Jenny's knuckles were white. Victoria finished writing. She looked at Marcus one more time. "Fix this. Put it back the way it was. Tonight." Then she turned and walked away. Her heels clicked down aisle 4. She stopped at the vitamin section, made another note, and continued toward the exit. She didn't say goodbye. The doors swung shut behind her and the black sedan's engine started outside. The store was silent. Marcus stood in aisle 3. His hands hung at his sides. His breathing was steady but shallow. Jenny walked over. She didn't say anything, just stood there for a moment, then went back to the counter. Phil disappeared into the stockroom. Marcus bent down, picked up the box of bandages, started moving them back to the bottom shelf where the planogram said they belonged. In the break room, Lily had stopped doing her homework. She was wild. Her pencil sat on the table, forgotten. 3 hours later, Marcus's shift ended. He clocked out, told Jenny good night, and met Lily at the side door. She had her backpack on. Her face was unreadable. They walked to the car in silence. A 15-year-old sedan with rust spots on the doors. Marcus unlocked it. They got in. He started the engine. The heater rattled to life. Lily didn't put on her seatbelt right away. She sat with her hands in her lap, staring straight ahead. Marcus pulled out of the parking lot, turned onto the main street. The late night. Her voice was small. He glanced at her, then back at the road. "Yeah? Why do you let her talk to you like that?" Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "It's her store," he said finally. So she can say what she wants." Lily looked at him. Really looked at him. Really looked at him. Really looked at him. "But you didn't do anything wrong." Marcus didn't answer. "You were helping it easier for people. And she called you, she said you were—" She couldn't finish the sentence, didn't want to repeat the words. The street lights passed overhead, one by one. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "you just have to let things go." "Why?" "Because it's easier." "For who?" He didn't have an answer for that. They drove the rest of the way in silence. 3 blocks, 2 turns. The apartment building came into view. Marcus parked in the back lot, turned off the engine. They sat there. The heater ticked as it cooled. Lily unbuckled her seatbelt, opened her door, then stopped. "I don't think it's easier," she said quietly. Marcus looked at her. "I think it—" Walked toward the building without looking back. Marcus sat in the driver's seat, watched her disappear through the entrance. His daughter, 12 years old, too smart for her own good. He thought about the note in his lunchbox. "You're still a hero, Dad." He didn't feel like one. He felt like a man who'd just been called worthless in front of his child and hadn't said a single word in his own defense. Marcus got out of the car, locked it, followed Lily inside. But the look on her face, the disappointment, quiet and aching, stayed with him long after. The following evening, Marcus arrived at the pharmacy at his usual time, 10 o'clock. The shift started the same as always. Jenny behind the counter, a handful of late-night customers browsing the aisles, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. He clocked in, grabbed his cart, started working. At midnight, a delivery truck pulled up to the loading dock. Marcus signed for the shipment. The driver helped him unload 6 pallets of inventory. Then the truck rumbled away and Marcus was alone in the stockroom. He started unpacking. Cases of over-the-counter seasonal allergy medications. His hands moved through the routine without thought. Open, check. Stock, repeat. Then he pulled open a case marked medical supplies. Inside were rolls of gauze, sterile tape, bottles of antiseptic solution, and underneath, wrapped in plastic, a box of suture kits. Marcus lifted the box, turned it over in his hands. The packaging hadn't changed in 6 years. Same blue and white label, same product code, same manufacturer logo in the corner. He was in a hospital hallway, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, the smell of blood and disinfectant thick in the air, alarms screaming from every direction, voices shouting, gurneys rolling past, one after another, an endless stream of broken bodies. Marcus in scrubs, younger, his hands steady despite the chaos around him, moving between patients, triaging, assessing, operating. A hand reached for his, pale fingers, cold. Elena. She was on a gurney. Her face was white, blood soaked through her scrub, but her eyes held his. Marcus squeezed her hand. His other hand checked her pulse. Too fast. Too shallow. "You're going to be fine," he said. He believed it. He had to believe it. Her eyes closed. The gurney started moving. Orderlies rushed her toward surgery. His surgery. He let go of her hand, turned to the next patient. The box of suture kits hit the concrete floor. The sound snapped Marcus back to the present. He was standing in the stockroom. His hands were shaking. He bent down, picked up the box, shoved it onto a shelf without looking at it. Kept working. Marcus clocked out, walked home through empty streets, let himself into the dark apartment. Lily was asleep. He checked on her. She was curled on her side, one hand under her pillow. He closed her door quietly. In his own room, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. Didn't turn on the light. Just sat there in the dark. Sleep didn't come. The next afternoon, Lily came home from school with her backpack full of books. She dropped it on the kitchen table with a heavy thud. "Big assignment?" Marcus asked. He was making coffee. She pulled out a poster board. "Due next week." Marcus poured his coffee. Didn't turn around. "What do you need?" "Photos. And, information. Birth dates, where people were born, that stuff." She spread the poster on the table. It was divided into sections. Grandparents, parents, her. Some of the spaces were already filled in with printed photos and handwritten notes. There was a blank space in the parents section. No photo, no information. Just an empty rectangle labeled Mom. Lily looked at him. Her expression was careful, neutral. "Do you have a pic?" The mug rattled slightly against the counter. "Yeah. Can I use it?" He opened his mouth, closed it. His jaw tightened. "I'll have to find it," he said finally. "It's packed away somewhere." Lily nodded. She didn't push. "Okay." She gathered up the poster board, the markers, started packing them back into her bag. "I can use a different project if it's easier," she said quietly. "Mrs. Chen said we could do a timeline instead." "No, it's fine. I'll find it." But they both knew he wouldn't look. Lily zipped her backpack, carried it to her room. The coffee was getting cold. He didn't drink it. He did have a photo of Elena, a whole box of them, on the top shelf of his closet, buried under winter clothes he never wore. He hadn't opened that box in 6 years. That night, Marcus lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The digital clock on his nightstand glowed red. 3:17 a.m. He'd given up on sleep an hour ago. Outside, a car drove past. Headlights swept across the wall. Then it was dark again. Elena's voice was in his head, clear as if she were lying beside him. She'd said it after his first solo surgery, 28 years old, terrified. But his hands had been steady, precise, perfect. She'd said it again on their wedding day, dancing in the hospital break room because they couldn't afford to take time off for a honeymoon. She'd said it the last time he saw her conscious. In that hallway, before they wheeled her away, "Your hands are the best I've ever seen." Marcus stared at his hands now. They rested on his chest, rising and falling with each breath. They didn't look like the best hands. Calloused from cardboard, dry from floor cleaner, the hands that had saved 32 people in one night, the hands that hadn't saved the 33rd. He'd spent 6 years trying to forget what Elena said. 6 years trying to prove her wrong. 2 nights later, the black sedan returned. Marcus was restocking vitamins in aisle 6 when he heard the engine outside. 11 o'clock. He glanced toward the windows. Same car. Same parking spot. Jenny looked up from the register. Her expression tightened. Victoria Hargrove pushed through the door. She moved like someone barely containing an explosion. Her suit was wrinkled. Her hair, usually perfect, had pieces falling loose from the tight bun. She carried her clipboard but gripped it like a weapon. Phil, the night manager, appeared from the back. He saw her and stopped. "Ms. Hargrove, we weren't expecting." Clearly. She walked past him. Started down aisle 1. Her heels struck the floor harder than usual. Faster. Marcus kept working. Kept his head down. Victoria tore through the store. Rode Jenny up. Moved to the pharmacy section and found a single pill bottle out of place on the shelf. "This is unacceptable," she snapped at no one in particular. Phil tried to explain. She cut him off. "I don't want excuses. I want competence." She moved to the stockroom. Pill followed. Marcus could hear her voice rising. Sharp. Cutting. "Do you know what I had to sit through today?" Victoria said. "Do you have any idea what it's like to defend yourself to people who think you only have your job because of your last name?" Phil murmured something. Marcus. "Don't placate me," Victoria snapped. "The first built this company. 12 stores, 200 employees, and they still call me a legacy hire." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Marcus set down the box of vitamins. Listened. "So when I come here and find this level of carelessness, this complete disregard for standards—" Victoria stopped mid-sentence. The silence was sudden. Wrong. Marcus straightened, looked toward the stockroom. Then he heard it. A crash. Metal shelves rattling. Victoria was on the ground. Her clipboard had skidded across the concrete. She was on her side, one hand pressed to her abdomen, the other reaching for the shelf she'd grabbed on the way down. Her face had gone pale, gray-white. Her breathing was shallow and quick. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her. "Ms. Hargrove?" Her eyes found his. There was recognition there, and something else. Terror. She gasped. "Something's wrong." Marcus's hands moved automatically, checking her pulse at the wrist. Too fast. Thready. He scanned her, but the way she held her abdomen, the way her skin had lost all color, the rapid, shallow breathing. His mind catalogued the signs faster than conscious thought. Severe abdominal pain. Shock presentation. Sudden onset. He knew what this was. "Phil," Marcus said. He knew what this was. "Phil," Marcus said. His voice was steady. "Call 911, now." Phil ran. Victoria's hand clutched her dress. Her fingers were shaking. She looked up at Marcus, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw her without the armor. Needed to see the abdomen. Check for distension. Discoloration. The signs his hands knew how to read. He reached toward her dress. Victoria grabbed his wrist. Her grip was weak but desperate. "Please," she gasped. "Don't lift my dress." The words were ragged. "No, lift my dress." The words were ragged. Not him. Not this man she'd called worthless. Not this man she'd degraded in front of his daughter. Not now. Not when she was broken and helpless on the floor. Her father's voice echoed in her head. The only lesson he... Marcus's hand hovered above her abdomen. He could see the distension even through the fabric. See the way the skin around her collarbone had taken on a mottled quality? Classic shock presentation. Ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. She had minutes, maybe less, but his hands wouldn't move. 6 years of muscle memory screaming at him to act, to assess, to stabilize. Every instinct he'd spent 2 decades building telling him exactly what to do. And he couldn't do it. Because the last time he'd trusted these hands with... Victoria's breathing grew more ragged. Her eyes started to flutter. In the background, Marcus could hear Phil on the phone. "Yes," she collapsed. "I don't know. No, she's conscious. Barely." Jenny appeared in the doorway, saw Victoria on the floor. Her hand went to her mouth. Marcus stared at his hands. They hovered 6 inches above Victoria's abdomen. Shaking now, he'd told himself for 6 years that he couldn't be trusted, that his judgment had failed, that the moment it mattered most, he hadn't been good enough. And now another woman was dying in front of him. Lily's voice in his memory. Why do you let her talk to you like that? The question had haunted him for 2 days. He hadn't had an answer. But maybe this was the answer. Maybe this was why. Because somewhere along the way he'd stopped believing he had the right to take up space, to use his hands, to matter. Marcus looked at Victoria's face, pale, fading. Then he looked at his hands, and he made a choice. Marcus lifted the dress. The fabric pooled at her ribs. Her abdomen was exposed, distended, the skin mottled in patches that told him everything he needed to know. Running from just below her sternum down toward her navel, faded but precise, clean edges, the kind of scar that came from a surgeon who knew exactly what they were doing. Marcus froze. He knew that scar. He knew the exact angle of the incision, the spacing of the suture marks, faint now but still visible if you knew where to look. He knew it because his hands had made it. 6 years ago, the memory hit him like a wave. The hospital, the mass casualty event, 32 patients in 6 hours, gurneys lined up in the hallway, alarms screaming, ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. The same presentation he was looking at now. He'd opened her up, repaired the vessel, closed her, and moved to the next patient before her family even arrived to identify her. He never saw her face, never knew her name, until now. Victoria Hargrove was alive because of him. The same night Elena died. The same hands he'd spent 6 years punishing had saved this woman. The woman who'd called him worthless, who'd humiliated him in front of his daughter. The realization crashed through him. 6 years of self-hatred, 6 years of hiding, 6 years of believing he couldn't be trusted. And all that time, this woman had been walking around, breathing, living, because of what he'd done. Victoria's breathing changed. Shorter. More shallow. The scar tissue was failing. Re-rupturing along the old repair line, no time. Marcus's hands moved before his mind caught up. Muscle memory taking over, 20 years of training overriding 6 years of doubt. "Phil, I need clean towels. Everyone you can find, move." Phil ran. Marcus positioned Victoria carefully on her side. Recovery position kept her airway clear. His hands found the pressure points along her abdomen. Applied steady, measured pressure, not too much. Just enough. "Ambulance is coming," Jenny said. Her voice shook. "They said 12 minutes. Tell them we have a ruptured AAA. Patient is in shock. Tell them to move faster." Jenny repeated it into the phone. Marcus kept his hands steady, kept the pressure consistent. Her skin had gone from pale to gray, but her breathing was holding, barely. "Towels," Phil gasped. He dropped an armful beside Marcus. "Fold them. Put them under her knees. Elevate her legs." Phil obeyed without question. Marcus checked her pulse again. Still thready. Still too fast. But she was stable. For now. His voice had changed. He could hear it. Deeper. Steadier. The voice of someone who'd done this before, who knew exactly what needed to happen, and paramedics rushed in with a gurney and equipment. The lead EMT dropped to his knees beside Marcus, took in the scene. Victoria's positioning, the towels. Marcus's hands maintaining steady pressure. "What do we got?" the EMT asked. "AAA rupture," Marcus said. "She's been down about 4 minutes. Pulse is weak. Respiration's shallow. I've maintained pressure on the bleed site." The EMT's eyes snapped to Marcus, really looked at him for the first time, saw the blue pharmacy vest, the name tag, the hands that knew exactly where to press. He lifted his hands slowly as the paramedics moved in with their equipment. Stepped back. Let them work. They moved fast. IV line, oxygen, backboard. The whole team working in synchronized efficiency. Victoria's eyes fluttered open. Just for a second, she looked around. Confused. Fading. Her gaze found Marcus. She heard the EMT's question. He could see it register through the haze of pain and shock. "Who are you?" Then the paramedics lifted her onto the gurney, strapped her in. They rolled her toward the ambulance at a run. The back doors slammed shut. The sirens kicked on again. The ambulance pulled away, lights cutting through the darkness, and then it was gone. The stockroom went quiet. Marcus stood in the middle of the floor. His hands hung at his sides. There was blood on his blue vest. Victoria's blood. Jenny and Phil were staring at him. "Marcus," Jenny whispered, how did you—" He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. He looked down at his hands. The hands that had made that scar 6 years ago. The hands he'd been punishing because they hadn't saved Elena. They were shaking now, but not from fear. From something else, something he couldn't name yet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A delivery truck rumbled past outside, the normal sounds of the world continuing while his entire understanding of the last 6 years fractured and rearranged itself. Victoria Hargrove was alive because of him. And she had no idea. 3 days later, Victoria Hargrove woke up in a private hospital room. The walls were pale blue. An IV line ran from her arm to a bag hanging on a metal pole. Sunlight filtered through half-closed blinds. Her abdomen ached, deep, dull, the kind of pain that reminded her she'd come very close to dying. The door opened. A man in scrubs entered, 50s, surgical cap still on. He checked the chart at the foot of her bed. "Ms. Hargrove." "I'm Dr. Patel. I performed your surgery." Victoria's throat was dry. She tried to sit up. Pain flared. She stopped. "What happened?" she asked. "Ruptured abdominal A." The words landed like stones. Victoria's hand moved instinctively to her abdomen, felt the thick bandage beneath the hospital gown. "You're very lucky," Dr. Patel continued. "Whoever stabilized you in the field saved your life. Another few minutes and you wouldn't have made it to surgery." Victoria's mind went back to the stockroom. The floor. The pain. Marcus Webb kneeling beside her. "Who was it?" she asked. Dr. Patel flipped through the chart. Paramedics reported a bystander with advanced medical training. They didn't get a name. Marcus Webb was a pharmacy stocker. But the paramedics' question echoed in Victoria's memory. "Who are you?" Dr. Patel left. Told her to rest. Told her she'd be in the hospital for at least another week. Victoria waited 5 minutes. Then she reached for her phone on the bedside table. Called her assistant. "Stephanie, I need you to pull an employee file." Stephanie's voice was careful, concerned. "Ms. Hargrove, you should be resting. Marcus Webb. Night shift at the Portland location. I need everything." Silence on the other end. "Now." "Not much. He's been with us for 2 years. Clean record. No disciplinary issues. Background check came back clear. Before that, nothing. No employment history. No references. It's like he didn't exist before he applied to us." Victoria's fingers tightened on the phone. "That's not possible." "I know. I tried running his name through other databases, social media, professional networks, nothing. Someone who knew advanced medical training didn't appear out of nowhere." "Keep looking," Victoria said. She hung up, stared at the ceiling. The machines beeped. Outside her room, a nurse. 2 hours later, Stephanie called again. "I found something. Hospital records from 6 years ago. Portland Mercy. There was a mass casualty event, March 15, 2018. Victoria went still. March 15, 2018. The night she didn't remember. The night she'd been brought in unconscious. The night she'd been brought in unconscious. The night someone had saved her life the first time. "Go on," Victoria said quietly. "There were 32 patients. You were one of them. Tagged as Jane Doe Act 7 until your family arrived." Victoria knew this part. She fought, but now she had a name. The surgeon of record was Dr. Marcus Webb. Victoria stopped breathing. "Say that again." "Dr. Marcus Webb. He operated on you 6 years ago. He's listed as the attending physician for your emergency repair. The stock boy who restocked shelves. The man she'd called incompetent. The man she'd humiliated in front of his daughter. He was a doctor. He'd saved her life 6 years ago. And she'd never known." "Find out everything," Victoria said. Her voice was steady, but something had shifted. Stephanie worked fast. By evening, Victoria had more. Dr. Marcus Webb, youngest chief of emergency medicine at Portland Mercy Hospital. Decorated, respected. Articles calling him a legend. Tributes from colleagues. Awards. A career that had made him one of the top emergency physicians in the country. And then an obituary. Dr. Elena Webb, trauma surgeon. Died March 18, 2018. 3 days after the mass casualty event, survived by her husband, Dr. Marcus Webb, and daughter Lily. Victoria read it 3 times. Victoria was one of them. Then he'd operated on his own wife. She survived the surgery. But she died 3 days later. Victoria set the tablet down. Her hands were shaking. After Elena died, there was nothing. No more articles, no more awards. Marcus Webb disappeared from every database, every professional registry, every trace of the career he'd built, until he showed up 2 years ago applying for a night shift position at a pharmacy. Victoria sat in the hospital bed. The sun had set. The room was dark. The man she'd called worthless. The man who'd knelt beside her on a stockroom floor and saved her life for the second time. The man who'd lost everything the same night he'd saved her the first time. Her phone rang. "Stephanie." "What do you want me to do?" her assistant asked. Victoria looked out the window. Portland's lights glittered in the distance. What did she want to do? Portland's lights glittered in the distance. What did she want to do? Offer him his job back? Promote him? Give him money? None of it felt like enough. Because she'd seen his face in the stockroom. He'd known exactly who she was, and he'd saved her anyway. "Nothing," Victoria said quietly. "Nothing? Not yet." She ended the call, sat in the dark, thought about the man who stocks shelves at night. The man whose daughter leaves notes in his lunchbox. The man who'd walked away from a legendary career and disappeared into a blue vest and a name tag. The man she'd called a waste of a paycheck. Victoria closed her eyes. For the first time in 20 years, she didn't know what to do. 1 week later, Marcus was restocking cold medicine in aisle 4. Her voice was low. "Urgent, she's here." He looked up. Through the front windows, he could see the black sedan in the parking lot. Victoria Hargrove walked through the doors. But something was different. She moved slower, careful. One hand rested against her side, over where the incision would be. She wore a dark blazer and slacks instead of her usual tailored suit. Her hair was still pulled back, but looser. Softer, softer. She scanned the store, found Marcus, held his gaze. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't "In the office," Victoria said. Jenny watched them walk toward the back. Her expression was worried, protective. The office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, filing cabinets along one wall. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Victoria closed the door behind them. She stood for a moment, then sat down slowly, winced slightly. The surgery was still fresh. Marcus stood standing. "I know who you are," Victoria said. Marcus didn't respond. "I've seen the records. From 6 years ago, Portland Mercy, the mass casualty event." The small office felt smaller. "And then last week you saved me again," Victoria continued. "After the first," her voice caught. "After the way I treated you." Marcus's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the wall behind her. "I want to make this right," Victoria said. She leaned forward slightly. "I'm offering you a promotion. Assistant manager, better pay, better hours, and I'd like to make a donation to your daughter's school, whatever she needs, tuition, supplies, college fund." She reached into her bag, pulled out a folded paper. "I also wrote you an apology. It's not enough, but I need you to know that I'm—" She stopped, took a breath. "I'm sorry for everything I said, for how I treated you." She placed the paper on the desk between them. Marcus looked at it, then at her. "No," he said quietly. Victoria blinked. "What?" "No." She sat back. Confusion crossed her face. "I don't understand. You don't want the promotion?" "No." "The money for your daughter?" "No." Victoria's hands gripped the armrests. This wasn't how she'd expected this to go. "Then what do you want?" "Nothing," he said. "Nothing. Nothing from you." Victoria shook her head slightly, like she was trying to make sense of a language she didn't understand. "This wasn't about you," Marcus said. His voice was still quiet, but there was something underneath it now. Something solid. "I didn't save your life because I wanted something from you. I did it because it needed to be done. I did it because it needed to be done." "I know, but you don't owe me anything." Victoria stood. She grabbed the desk for balance. Pain flashed across her face. "Then, what am I supposed to do with this? You were a legend, one of the best emergency physicians in the country, and I called you worthless. I degraded you in front of your daughter. And then you saved my life anyway, twice. How am I supposed to—" She stopped. Her hands were shaking. Marcus waited. Let the silence settle. "If you want to make things right," he said finally, "start by treating your employees like human beings." Victoria looked at him. "Not because you owe me," Marcus continued, "because it's right. I can do both." "Then do it for the—" Victoria's shoulders dropped slightly. She sat back down. Slower this time. You could go back, she said quietly, to medicine. You're wasted here. Marcus's expression didn't change. I'm not wasted, he said. I'm exactly where I need to be. But your daughter, Lily, don't you want... Don't talk about my daughter. The words were sharp, clean, final. Victoria closed her mouth. Marcus moved toward the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. You want to help? He said without turning around. Be better. To everyone. Not just me. The fluorescent light buzzed. The apology letter sat unread on the desk. She'd offered him everything she could think of. Money, power, opportunity, respect. And he'd said no, because none of it was what mattered. Marcus finished his shift, clocked out, drove home through the quiet streets. The conversation replayed in his mind, the look on Victoria's face when he'd walked out. He let himself into the apartment. Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up when he entered. Hey, Dad. Hey. He set his keys. She could always tell when something had happened. How was work? She asked. Marcus poured water into the kettle, turned on the stove. Different, he said. Different how? He turned to face her. His daughter, 12 years old, her mother's eyes. Too observant, too smart. I stood up for myself today, he said. Lily set down her pencil. I stood up for myself today. Her face changed, softened. Something that had been tight in her expression loosened. Yeah? Yeah. She smiled. A real smile. Wide and genuine. The first one he'd seen from her in weeks. The kettle started to whistle. He turned back to the stove. But he could feel it. The small shift. The weight that had been sitting on his chest for days, since the stockroom, since Victoria's collapse, since he'd seen that scar, was lighter now. Not gone, but lighter. And for the first time in 6 years, Marcus Webb felt like maybe, just maybe, he was allowed to take up space in the world again. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the back of a hotel conference room with 200 other Hargrove Pharmacy employees. The invitation required attendance for all regional staff. The email said Victoria Hargrove would be speaking about recent challenges and recovery. Marcus had considered calling in sick. But Jenny had looked at him that morning and said, "You should go." So he went. The conference room was too bright, too warm. Rows of chairs faced a small stage with a podium and a microphone. Employees filled the seats. Some Marcus recognized from his store, most he didn't. He stayed in the back, near the exit, tried to make himself small. People were talking. Marcus caught fragments as employees passed him. Heard she almost died. Someone at the Portland store saved her. No, I heard it was a customer. I heard it was that night guy, the quiet one. Marcus kept his eyes forward. At exactly 2 o'clock, Victoria walked onto the stage. She moved slower than she used to. She moved slower than she used to. Careful. But her posture was straight. Her suit was dark blue, crisp. Her hair pulled back like always. The room went quiet. Victoria stood behind the podium, looked out at the crowd. Her voice was steady, professional. I want to talk to you today about our third quarter performance, our expansion strategy, and some operational changes we'll be implementing in the coming months. She looked down at her notes, flipped a page. Marcus's shoulders relaxed slightly. This was just another corporate meeting. He could sit through it, then leave. Victoria started talking about quarterly earnings, revenue projections, market share. The words washed over the room like white noise. Then she stopped mid-sentence. Her hands gripped the podium. She looked up from her notes. That's not what I want to talk about. The room shifted. Employees glanced at each other. Victoria took a breath. 3 weeks ago, I collapsed in the stockroom of our Portland location. I had a ruptured aneurysm. I was bleeding internally. The ambulance was 12 minutes away. Her voice was quieter now. I should have died on that floor. No one moved. But I didn't. Because someone was there. Someone who knew exactly what to do. Someone who stabilized me until the paramedics arrived. Victoria paused. That person was Marcus Webb. Looking for him. He wanted to disappear. Marcus works night shift, Victoria continued. He stocks shelves. He cleans. He stays late when we're short-staffed. I've walked past him 100 times and never really saw him. Her hands were shaking. She gripped the podium harder. 3 weeks before he saved my life, I stood in that same store and I called him incompetent. I questioned why he was still employed. I called him a waste of a paycheck, in front of customers, in front of his coworkers, in front of his daughter. The silence in the room was at what I didn't know, Victoria said, her voice starting to crack, is that Marcus Webb was Dr. Marcus Webb, one of the best emergency physicians this city has ever seen. He saved 32 lives in a single night 6 years ago during a mass casualty event. She stopped, steadied herself. I was one of them. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He operated on me 6 years ago, saved my life then. I never knew his name, never saw his face, and 6 years later, when I collapsed in front of him, after everything I'd said to him, he saved me again. Victor, she held his gaze. I was wrong, she said, about him, about what makes someone valuable, about what leadership means. She looked back at the crowd. I've spent 20 years building this company, proving I deserved to be here, proving I wasn't just my father's daughter. And somewhere along the way, I started measuring people's worth by the same standards people used to measure mine. Title, position, visibility. Her voice was raw now, unpolished. But worth isn't about where you stand in a hierarchy. It's about doing the right thing even when it costs you everything. She gestured toward Marcus. That man in the back gave up a legendary career. He walked away from everything he'd built, and he did it quietly, with dignity, without asking for recognition. And when someone needed him, someone who treated him terribly, he didn't hesitate. Victoria's hands left the podium, hung at her sides. I'm standing here today because of him, and I owe every single one of you an apology. Because if I treated him that way, how many of you have I measured by the wrong standards? The room was so quiet Marcus could hear his own breathing. Things are going to change, Victoria said. New policies, better hours, better pay. But more than that, I'm going to change, because I don't ever want to be the person who can't see what's valuable right in front of her. She picked up her notes, set them aside. That's all I wanted to say. She stepped away from the podium, walked off the stage. No closing remarks, no questions, just silence. Then someone started clapping, then another. Marcus stood frozen against the back wall. As the applause died down, employees started moving, some toward the exits, some toward each other, talking in hushed tones. But several turned toward Marcus. A woman from the Beaverton location approached first. Thank you, she said quietly, for what you did. Then a man from inventory. Then 2 pharmacy techs from downtown. One by one, people came up to him, thanked him. Some apologized for not speaking up when Victoria had berated him. Marcus didn't know what to say. He just nodded. She didn't say anything, just hugged him tight. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. The crowd began to thin, people filing out, back to their stores, their shifts, their lives. Marcus started toward the exit. Marcus. He turned. Victoria stood a few feet away. The crowd had cleared around them. She stepped forward, extended her hand. Marcus looked at it, then at her face. She wasn't wearing her armor anymore. The sharp edges had softened. There was something else in her expression now, something that looked like humility. He took her hand. "Shh, I know." They stood there for a moment. Two people who'd seen each other at their worst, who'd been stripped down to something raw and real in a stockroom at midnight. They weren't friends. Probably never would be. But something had shifted between them. Some fundamental understanding had been reached. Victoria let go of his hand. "Take care of yourself, Marcus. You too." She walked away. Toward the exit. Toward her car. Toward whatever came next. Marcus stood in the empty conference room. The chairs were still in rows. The podium still on the stage. He thought about Lily's smile when he'd told her he stood up for himself. He thought about the way his hands had moved without hesitation when Victoria collapsed. He thought about Elena's voice. "Your hands are the best I've ever seen." For the first time in 6 years, Marcus Webb didn't feel like he was hiding. He felt like he was standing exactly where he was supposed to be. 6 months later, Marcus Webb stood in front of a classroom at Portland Community College. 23 students sat in the rows before him. EMTs, nursing students, firefighters. People who wanted to know how to save lives when seconds mattered. He picked up a training mannequin. Set it on the table. "Shock presents in stages," he said. His voice was calm, clear. "You have to recognize it early, because by the time it's obvious, you're already behind." He demonstrated. Checked the pulse. Assessed the skin. Explained the signs most people missed. The students leaned forward, taking notes, asking questions, hanging on every word. Marcus had been teaching the emergency response. Wasn't back in an ER, but he was using his hands again, using his knowledge, making sure fewer people died from the things he'd learned to see, honoring Elena's memory in the only way that felt right. "Anyone can learn the steps," he told the class, "but the difference between someone who freezes and someone who acts is simple. You have to trust that you know what you're doing, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared." A student in the back row raised her hand. "What if you make a mistake?" Marcus paused. Set down the mannequin. "You will," he said quietly. "Everyone. The question is whether you let that mistake stop you from trying the next time." The student nodded, wrote something down. Marcus glanced at the clock. 7:30. "That's it for tonight. See you Thursday." The students packed up, filed out. A few stopped to thank him, to ask follow-up questions. Marcus answered them patiently. Then the room was empty. He gathered his materials, turned off the lights, walked into the hallway. Lily was waiting on a bench near the door. She was 13 now, taller, ready. They walked to the car together. The evening air was cool, spring sliding into summer. The campus was quiet. Most students had left for the day. Marcus unlocked the car. They got in. Lily buckled her seatbelt, looked over at him. "Your students really like you," she said. "How do you know?" "I can hear them talking when they come out. They say you're the best teacher they've ever had." Marcus started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot. "I'm glad." They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Lily spoke again. Her expression was serious, earnest. "Why?" "Because you stopped hiding." The words landed softly, simply, but they carried weight. Marcus kept his eyes on the road. His throat tightened. "Thank you," he said. 20 minutes later they pulled into the cemetery. The sun was setting. Long shadows stretched across the headstones. Marcus parked near the west gate. They walked together down the familiar path. Elena's grave was under a maple tree. Simple headstone, clean lines. Dr. set them against the stone. Lily stood beside him, quiet, respectful. Marcus stayed there for a moment, his hand resting on the cool granite. "I think my hands are okay now," he said quietly. The wind rustled the leaves overhead. A bird called somewhere in the distance. Marcus stood. Lily slipped her hand into his. They walked back to the car together. On the drive home, Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Jenny. Thought you'd want to know. New schedule just posted. Better shifts. Better pay. Victoria, still demanding, still pushing for excellence. But something had changed. New employee policies, shorter hours, better benefits. She still expected a lot from her staff, but she no longer treated them like they were disposable. At home, Marcus unlocked the apartment door. The familiar space greeted them. Small. Warm. Theirs. Lily dropped her backpack by the door, headed straight for the kitchen table, pulled out her homework. Marcus washed his hands, started pulling ingredients from the fridge. Pasta, vegetables, olive oil. Lily worked at the table, pencil scratching across paper. Occasionally she'd pause, think, then write again. "What are you working on?" Marcus asked. "English essay." "About what?" Lily didn't look up, but he could hear the small smile in her voice. "Heroes," she said. "We have to write about someone we admire." Marcus stirred the pasta, waited. "I'm writing about you." He stopped stirring, looked over at her. She was watching him now, her mother's eyes. Clear. Honest. "You don't have to do that." Lily put down her pencil, looked at him directly. "Because you didn't give up," she said. "Even when everything was terrible, even when you wanted to, you kept showing up, for me, for yourself. And when someone needed you, you helped them, even though they didn't deserve it." Her voice was steady, matter of fact, like she was stating something obvious. "That's what heroes do," she said. "They keep going, even when it's hard." Marcus couldn't speak. His chest was tight, his eyes burned. Lily picked up her pencil, went back to writing, blinked hard, stirred the pasta. They ate together at the small kitchen table, talked about Lily's day at school, her upcoming exams, the summer plans they were making. Normal conversation, easy, comfortable. After dinner, Lily cleared the dishes. Marcus dried them. She went to her room to finish homework. Marcus sat on the couch, picked up a book, read a few pages. The apartment was quiet, peaceful. His lunchbox sat on the counter where he'd left it that morning. He got up, opened it. No note inside. Lily had stopped leaving them months. Outside, the city hummed. Cars passed. People went about their lives. The world kept turning. And in a small apartment 3 blocks from a pharmacy where a man once restocked shelves and tried to disappear, Marcus Webb sat down, let out a long breath. He wasn't a surgeon anymore, wasn't running an ER, wasn't saving lives in the middle of the night. But his hands were steady, his daughter was happy. And for the first time in 6 years, he didn't feel like he was hiding from who he was. He felt whole. The wounds we carry don't define, but they don't have to be the end. The grace we show when no one is watching, the quiet strength we find when everything is broken, the choice to keep going even when we're not sure we can. That's what reveals who we truly are. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be seen.